All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to play detective. We're investigating a mystery that really pushes the boundaries of what we thought animals could do. And really, it's a case that forces us to ask a much bigger question. What does it actually mean to be self-aware?
Okay, so let's get right to the heart of it. We all know that a lot of animals are incredibly smart, right? They can learn, they can solve problems, they can remember stuff. But here's the real question, the one that's a bit of a mind bender. Are they aware of what they know? I mean, can an animal know that it knows something? Or, and this is even crazier, know that it doesn't know something?
You know, to really wrap our heads around this, let's just make it personal for a second. Think about taking a test. For an easy question, you just know the answer, right? It's this feeling of total confidence. But then you hit a hard one, and you get that nagging doubt, that little internal signal that tells you, you're not sure? That's what lets you make a smart move, like skipping it and coming back later. It's an incredibly powerful tool we use all the time.
Well, this ability actually has a fancy scientific name, metacognition. It's basically thinking about thinking. It's this self-reflection that lets us check in with ourselves, figure out what's going on in our own heads, and then make a decision based on that. It's a huge part of what we consider higher-level thinking. And for decades, the big question for scientists has been, are we humans the only ones who can do it?
Okay, so how do you even start to investigate this? Scientists had to get really creative. I mean, you can't just ask an animal if it's feeling uncertain, right? So they had to figure out a way for an animal to basically say, I don't know. They needed a way for it to raise its hand and opt out of a tough question. And this led to a really clever experimental setup called the uncertainty response paradigm.
So the first big break in the case came from a bottlenose dolphin. The task they gave it was actually pretty straightforward. The dolphin would hear a sound, a tone, and it just had to press one lever if it was a high-pitched tone and another lever if it was a low-pitched one. Simple enough, right?
But here is where things get really clever. This was the brilliant part of the whole setup. The dolphin wasn't forced to guess if it wasn't sure. They gave it a third option, an opt-out lever. If the dolphin pressed that one, it would just skip the question and move on to the next one. It was the perfect way for it to say, I'm not sure about this one, without using a single word.
And you know what? The results were absolutely stunning. When the tones were super easy to tell apart, the dolphin pretty much never used that opt-out lever. But when the tones were almost identical, I mean the really, really hard ones, its use of that I'm not sure lever just skyrocketed. It was selectively skipping the exact trials where it was most likely to get it wrong. Wow.
And this wasn't just a fluke with one dolphin. Scientists found the same thing with rhesus monkeys using a visual test. They showed the exact same pattern. But here's the real kicker. When they had humans do the same task, people said they opted out on the hard ones because they felt consciously uncertain. So the evidence was really starting to pile up. It looked like the first big clue is in. Some animals might actually have metaminds.
But you know, in any good detective story, the first clue is never the whole picture. There's always a plot twist. And sure enough, a major challenge came up from other scientists. They asked, could this whole thing just be a lot simpler? What if it wasn't self-reflection at all?
And this led to a really strong counter-argument. What if the animals weren't feeling uncertain at all? What if they just learned a clever trick, a simple strategy that had nothing to do with thinking about their own thoughts?
So this really sets up the central debate. On one side, you have the metacognitive view, which says the animal is actually monitoring its internal feeling of uncertainty. On the other side, you've got the associative view, which is way simpler. It says the animal isn't thinking about its thoughts at all. It's just learning that certain things, like those really tricky tones, are just bad bets that usually lead to a penalty, so it learns to avoid them. Simple stimulus response, nothing more.
Okay, so to solve this, the scientists had to go even deeper. They had to design even smarter experiments. They needed to find a way to break that simple link between a bad stimulus and getting penalized. They had to force the animal to rely on something other than just simple learning.
And that's a huge challenge, right? How do you stop a really smart animal from just learning a simple pattern? Well, one of the most brilliant solutions they came up with was a method called opaque reinforcement. And the name is perfect, as you'll see. So here's how it works. A monkey does a bunch of trials in a row, say 4 of them. But, and this is the really important part, it doesn't get any feedback right away. No good job, no wrong answer. Instead, all the rewards and penalties are saved up and then just dumped on the monkey all at once at the very end, completely shuffled. This makes it literally impossible for the monkey to connect one specific tricky trial with getting a penalty. And here's the absolute bombshell. Even with that simple learning link totally broken, the rhesus monkeys still use the uncertainty option on the hardest trials. And get this, they even did it on brand new abstract tasks they'd never seen before, where there was no history of rewards or penalties at all. This was a massive blow to that simpler associative learning theory. So with this really powerful new evidence in hand, the investigation moved into its final stage. If this thinking about thinking is a real thing, a higher level skill, well then the big question becomes who has it and who doesn't.
And this is where the answer gets super interesting. Because you'd think, right, that if this was just a simple learned trick, then any really smart animal should be able to figure it out, especially the ones that are amazing at learning patterns. But that is not what happened.
Just look at the scorecard here. The pattern is incredibly clear. Rhesus monkeys, dolphins, great apes, they all consistently show this metacognitive ability. But then you look at capuchin monkeys and pigeons. Now, these are highly intelligent animals, masters of learning, and they repeatedly failed these tests. They just don't use that uncertainty option when it would be smart to do so.
And believe it or not, the failure of the pigeons and capuchins might be the single most important clue in this whole mystery. Think about it. If this was just a simple learned trick, these master learners should be the best in the world at it. The fact that they can't do it, well, that's incredibly strong evidence that something more is going on. It suggests you need a special, higher-level skill that they just don't seem to have.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? The evidence we've looked at points very strongly to one conclusion. The ability to monitor your own uncertainty, which is a real form of metacognition, is not just a human thing. It looks like a genuine, high-level cognitive skill that is absolutely present in the minds of some other animals.
And that leaves us with one last, really big question to think about. This whole detective story, it's not just about how smart animals are, is it? It's really about us, too. Because if the ability to reflect on our own minds isn't uniquely human, it gives us a massive clue in the much larger mystery of consciousness itself. How and why a reflective mind, like the one you're using to think about this right now, ever evolved in the first place.